Italy almost a year ago now. I moved to a small village in the north of the country on the Alps that they share with France. I thought it would be interesting to show you around my little village, show you for me what a normal weekend is like living here, and also just to showcase the demographics and the general lifestyle in the north of Italy in a village that is predominantly filled with people over 55. I'm sure most of you have heard about the demographic situation in Italy, and I think it's very interesting just to show kind of how true that is outside of the cities. It is very noticeable. So let's take a look around. The first thing to note about where I live in northern Italy, in my small village, is that the prices paid for food and drink when you go out are still quite affordable. And you have a lot of unrivaled space with forests and mountains, and there's virtually no cars on the road, especially the deeper you go into the mountains, specifically in this area, because it is rather undiscovered or unpopular compared to places like the Dolomites. Of course, in the north, everything costs more than the south, but the north also hosts most of the jobs and most of the economic development. In fact, Italy is said to be the country in the EU with the largest contrast of prosperity in the one country. In 2021, it was noted that over 20% of the population in the southern regions of Calabria, Campania, and Apulia were living below the poverty line. Interestingly, though, one of Italy's main problems, being their incredibly low birth rate, is much worse off in the north than the south, which does tend to follow the trends of opportunities and prosperity and low birth rates going hand in hand. As the increased development in the north has also brought with it drastic increase in living costs compared to the south, meaning there's less and less money to invest in having children. In 2024, it's estimated that almost one in four people in Italy are 65 or older, which isn't looking to change as wages continue to stagnate and the cost of living continues to soar. While Italy's birth rate is in the lowest of Europe, sharing the position with Spain and Malta. The situation isn't helped by Italy's lack of good, solid jobs, also, even in the north, which has seen more than 500,000 Italians leave the country in the past 10 years, mainly to Switzerland and Germany in search of better jobs. One third of those leaving being under 35. So, back to talking about just everyday life and prices in the north. So, usually I would spend around €2 in the morning to have a cappuccino and a croissant. I go to this restaurant in the shopping center sometimes to have lunch because they serve meals for around €5 to €7, which I think is pretty good. The thing I find the hardest to get used to here is the Asian food is considered very exotic, perhaps, and therefore it isn't cheap. A pad thai might cost around €15 at a restaurant, and just the soy sauce in the supermarket is around €4 or €5. However, in the closest city to me, which is an hour and a half away, there are Asian marts where you can pay less. But hey, a great pizza in my town since at about €4 for a margarita, so can't complain too much, and I really do admire how proud Italians are of their food. So, I'm sure we all know about Italian ghost towns and the increasing prevalence of them. You've probably heard of the €1 house schemes, and this is, of course, the government's try hard approach to revive the staggering amount of ghost towns. Currently, there are at least 5,000 of these ghost towns across Italy. We also see plenty of these ghost towns close to our village as you go deeper and deeper into the mountains, say 20 minutes plus drive, and you start to see a lot of them. The only saving grace for some of these villages are some families having success posting family homes as holiday homes since no one wants to live there anymore. I often visit these gorgeous mountain villages like this one I'm going hiking in this weekend. Um, they're super close to where we live, and I notice all the population is over 70, and I can't help but be sad to think that in just 10 years or so, these villages will die too. What I love about this area I live in is that everybody has either, well, lived here their whole life, which is very common, or they're super into the outdoors. Because in this area, if you're not into the outdoors, you will go insane from boredom. So even if it's 4 degrees, but the sun is out, you'll see droves of people cycling, often in groups of like 4 to 8 people, or alone, or just 2 people. Either way, you see people ride past your house all the time. Then, when you go in the mountains, there's people mountain biking. If people aren't bike fit, you see people e biking of all ages. There's always people out hiking, and then, of course, when snow season starts, this area is full of passionate skiers, especially for tour ski and Nordic ski. I even see people practicing for the ski season on the footpath where they use, let's call them rollerblade skis. I don't know what they're called, but that for me is a serious passion. Now, to address something that I think is quite a common thought or question for people moving to Italy is, what about friends? Obviously, in small towns, it's a lot harder just because of, well, the age demographic, and I guess just the lack of people moving here, and that most of the people that are young and are here have lived here forever. So they have all their friends from high school. Plus, of course, there's the issue of language. I haven't mentioned yet, but actually, in the town I live in, there are very few people that speak another language. Some speak French because of the proximity to France. So when I first arrived here, I was speaking French, but actually, only the older generation know French, because I'm not sure if young Italians learn French at school anymore. Probably they learn English. But most people in my town, let's say from like 25 to 50, will only speak Italian. And then maybe some of the over 50s, they speak more French. That's what I found in my small town. Of course, this is just in my area. It's not the same for all of Italy, of course. Um, but when I go to the nearest city, I must say I do find making friends in Italy quite easy. A lot of them are foreigners like myself, but there are also the odd Italian as well, especially Italians that have traveled. And they are often like super keen to meet people from abroad that have decided to move to Italy, because a lot of them are very curious of why you chose to move here. I'm sure a lot of them have their own criticisms of the country, so often they are surprised that people move here, especially if you move from a country that's perceived to be doing better than Italy. So I think people, especially in my small town, are very interested in hearing my story and talking to me, because they almost can't imagine why I moved here. So that's always funny having that discussion. But as for making friends, let's talk about the city, because it's a lot easier and more straightforward. There are a lot of Facebook groups that I found. For example, there's pages like stranieri in Italia, or something like this, or in the city, and like expats in Italy, and people will often talk about, hey, I just moved to this place, I'm looking for people trying to make friends, or people, they might mention where they're from, and they say, are there any other blah blah blah. And people are really quick to respond, super responsive. There's even lots of Italians in this group that comment or that post saying they're looking for international friends. And they'll direct you to other groups that are specific for the city that you live in. I know, like, for instance, probably Milan and Rome, because they have probably the biggest foreigner population. But definitely, I've known from experience in Bologna and Torino, there's a lot of like Facebook groups specifically for those cities. There's also a lot of hobby groups that are very active, and on their Facebook page, they'll have a QR code for their WhatsApp group, so you can get in just like that. There's also apps like Share My Meal, where you can sign up to have a dinner with 4 other strangers, and people will sign up to host the 3 other strangers in their house. So you go to their house for dinner. Yeah, it's super interesting. There's lots of options like this. So this is how I've tended to make friends so far. Of course, if you work, that really helps. I don't work in person in Italy, so I think if I had, that would probably help me more. Especially, I think if you work in Italy, it's super good for learning the language. I find that I've been a lot slower to learn the language because I work in English for like a company outside of Italy. That being said, I just work freelance, so I'm not working full time or anything. So I've also found life in Italy expensive because, yeah, I'm not coming on a full time wage or anything like this. But yeah, you get by. So, all in all, considering my age, I really do love being in the cities of Italy just because of the opportunities for socializing, I find are really good. But then at the same time, whenever I come back to my small town from the city, I always feel like relieved because, as you can see from this, is like my typical Sunday. It's absolutely beautiful. There's no traffic. The mountains are gorgeous, and the skies are always clear. It's super unpolluted here compared to some of the cities in Italy. So yeah, like I guess you kind of strike a balance trying to get the best of both worlds.